Before we do that, I would just like to tell folks a little bit about Global Links. Two reminders before I do that. We do record the session. And we also stream live on Facebook. So if anyone's having trouble with their Zoom connection, or if you want to remind your friends to go and see us on Zoom, I encourage you to send us to send your friends and family and relatives and loved ones out to Facebook. Okay. So let's see. Our next slide, just to give you a little bit of the agenda, I introduce myself, right? Our overview, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what is Global Links. I will introduce our moderator, Susan Porcaro Goings, and then she's going to speak with the president. And as we always say, this is really an informal, we don't use the word interview very particularly because it's not an interview, it's a conversation between two good friends of Global Links and ongoing supporters of Global Links. And so they're going to chat a little bit to get to know each other and to talk through some of the aspects of Global Links that apply to us as well. And then we're going to have some questions from the audience. So as a reminder, if you have questions, please put those into the chat box, and our program manager, Yasmin Mesbah, is moderating that, and she will send some questions to me so that we can pose those to President Cornwell, who for today's purposes in our informal session, we're going to be using his first name, Grant. So thanks for letting us be that informal with you, Grant. And then we will also take a screen photo. So I know that many of you from around the world do not have your video active because of bandwidth issues, and that's totally cool. We're just super happy to have you here. And we'll give you a little warning before we go for the screenshot. So Juliana Angaro, one of our graduate assistants for Global Links, will be taking the photo, and she'll let you know when that's happening, and hopefully we'll have a couple of screens. Looks like we already have a few screens, so it might take a moment to do that. So if you need to put any makeup on or comb your hair or make yourself look even more beautiful than you already are, go ahead and do that now, and we'll give you a heads up before we do that. And then we're going to invite you to our next webinar, which is going to happen in September. So more details on that. So I see we've got some messages coming in on our chat box. And so thanks for sharing that. Be sure to put that on the side of your screen so you can see who else is on the call with you. We do have our Global Link scholars from India and Brazil. We have lots of our change makers from India and Brazil, and we have some entrepreneurs with us as well. Okay. I just see that somehow I went out of the slide mode. So thank you, Juliana, for letting me know that. All right. So what is Global Links? Many of you have heard this before, but again, we have a new audience on Facebook, we hope. So I wanted to take a few minutes to just explain this to you. It is a public-private partnership between ourselves, the Cornwell Graduate School of Business at Rollins College, between the Rick and Susan Goings Foundation, who provides our financial support, and the U.S. Department of State Global Women's Issues. In that program, it is a cross-cultural train the trainer program. So I mentioned we have scholars online. We consider them the first line of trainers. What they do is come stay with us here at Rollins for a semester, and they interact with our excellent business community in the Orlando area and learn more about social entrepreneurship, learn more about the concept around that and an ecosystem of entrepreneurship, and interact with students and colleagues here at Rollins, learning from pedagogy and different approaches of teaching. Then they return to their home country, as I mentioned thus far, India and Brazil, and they recruit some students who we call mentors and change makers, and those students are paired one-on-one with female entrepreneurs to help those female entrepreneurs in the areas of business growth, self-development or self-confidence, and the understanding the economic, social, and environmental impact of their business. So as I mentioned, we have all of those players on the line with us today. We operate out of Rollins College here in beautiful Winter Park, Florida, which you can see from behind my screen there. That's actually a screenshot of our campus. Our first scholar was from Iraq. And our second two scholars were from India. Our third scholar was from Brazil. And we are currently recruiting our next scholar from Brazil. So I'm hoping that some of our applicants are also online today. And the key thing here is, again, that cycle and rippling effect of train the trainer. So the students train the entrepreneurs, right? So it's that training of the training and become more involved and learn a lot more about their community. Over the next 5 years, we hope to expand into other countries within Latin America. So stay tuned for more great stories from Global Links. All right, that's all I'm going to do for my share. So let me come back in here. And then with that, I'm going to take a moment to introduce Susan. Give me 1 second. I'm switching screens, and that's always a challenge. Okay, so Susan Porcaro Goings, we have an incredible honor to have her with us today because Susan is an advocate for women's empowerment, which is what Global Links is all about. At the same time, she's a supporter of at-risk youth and is a co-founder of the World Federation of Youth Clubs with the gentleman who you met in our first webinar, Mr. Rick Goings. Susan has traveled the world, utilizing her experience as a reporter, news anchor, and broadcaster to gather inspirational stories of women and their journeys to a confident life in the chain of confidence, excuse me. Susan began her broadcasting career with WFTV, where she became the first female account executive. Upon graduating from Rollins College, she joined KABC TV in Los Angeles, breaking another barrier as their first female account executive while simultaneously hosting on-air travel shows. During her broadcast career, she interviewed political dignitaries, newsmakers, and celebrity legends. As I mentioned, Susan and her husband, Rick, who you've met before, I hope, in our first webinar, provide financial resources for college scholarships and youth development programs for at-risk youth, in addition to the Global Links. Susan serves on the Rollins College Hamilton Holt Board, and she was awarded the Voice for Women Award by the Sewell Belmont House and Museum in Washington, D.C. for her exemplary global commitment to women's economic empowerment. So I think that you can see the incredible alignment between Susan's life journey and what Global Links and Rollins College stands for. And now that you've known a little bit about Susan, I want to let you know you can learn more about her and her life because she has a book coming out. The book is called So Dig It. And it's about her late husband, Jeff Porcaro, who is a multi-Grammy winner, musician, writer, producer, and co-founder of the band, which I love, so I'm so excited about this, Toto. That book is going to be released next year. And so Susan, first and foremost, thanks for being here. Thanks for giving us your talent and time. And we welcome you to our Global Links webinar.
Thank you, Mary, very much. Are we out of time now?
Sorry, did I take a little long? I get excited when I go to Global Links. You know how that is, Susan.
I do. It's a fabulous program. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
All right. Good morning, Grant.
Good morning, Susan.
I would like to begin, if you don't mind, how about if you share with us your path and what brought you to Rollins College and to the presidency?
Yes, I'm happy to do that, Susan. And let me say good morning to you all and offer a couple words of explanation. I am actually at a home in the mountains of upstate New York. So to make this work technologically, I'm on the video chat, and I hope you can see me. But the audio, I'm using a landline. Look, the telephone even has a wire on it. So we're going very retro here, and I hope it's all working. I guess the second thing I would say is I want to thank Mary Conway Dadawan for that introduction and for this whole webinar series, which I think is incredibly forward-leaning, and also Susan for being the interviewer. And I will tell you, all of you on this webinar, that this is actually an interview where the interviewer is a much more interesting person than the interviewee. So I hope that this can be a conversation between the two of us. So I am Grant Cornwell. I'm president of Rollins College, and I have been the president of this university now for 5 years. Before that, I was the president of another university, the College of Worcester in Worcester, Ohio, for 8 years, and before that, a dean and a professor of philosophy at a university in New York. So I began my career as a philosophy professor and was for some 20 years. And I was led to that career not just for a passion for understanding, but also out of a passion for teaching. I realized early on that education is the single most powerful vehicle we have in the world to advance human understanding, but also to advance human prosperity. So I wanted to be part of that effort. And I have given my career to trying to advance that mission. And we'll be talking more about the link between the mission or the purpose of Rollins College and the link and the purpose of Global Links. But that's just a little bit about my background, and I'm happy to jump into the conversation.
Great. When you mention your mission, when you arrived on the Rollins campus and you heard about Global Links, what did you think? Is that a typical program, especially for a small liberal arts school? Is that something that you expected to find on that campus? And why did you go on to embrace it? And you've been so supportive since your arrival. Tell us what your first impression was.
So my first impression was I have arrived at the right place. To me, Global Links completely aligns both with my own purpose, my own sense of purpose, but also with what is the stated mission of Rollins College. I came to Rollins because of its mission. I am a very mission-aligned, mission-driven person. It's what I think about when I get up in the morning. It's what I think about when I go to bed at night. What is our purpose? What are we trying to achieve? And at Rollins, we talk about the mission of the college being to educate students for global citizenship and responsible leadership. So think about those two terms, global citizenship and responsible leadership. That's what drew me to Rollins. And for those of you who haven't been, but I hope many of you might have a chance to visit someday, Rollins College is a small liberal arts college in the middle of a global city, Orlando, which is a very diverse global city with tremendous dynamism of cultures and peoples and languages and ideas and technology, much like many of the dynamic cities in India and in Brazil. And that was very attractive to me, because if you're going to offer an education for global citizenship and responsible leadership, I think it's very compelling to do it in a site where those skills and attributes and values are most needed. So that's what brought me to Rollins. And then when I came here and I learned about the structure and vision of Global Links, I thought, this is exactly right, because this is a transnational collaboration bringing together women around empowerment. And it's easy to map the vision of Global Links with the mission of Rollins College. I mean, Global Links is actively investing in and producing global citizens and responsible leaders, but not just on a college campus, throughout the global economy in the sites where we're active. So that's why I immediately resonated with it. I'll say one more thing about it, Susan. You know, so many transnational collaborations have the West, if you will, being the benefactor and the provider to the developing world, which is positioned always as the recipient. And that's understandable, given the history of colonialism, given the history of imperialism. We can understand why that structure is in place. But Global Links disrupts that, because Global Links says that for real empowerment and education to take place, it has to take place on the ground, in the economy, in the culture where that is happening. And so what we see with Global Links is we have leaders and mentors in Iraq and in India and Brazil and who knows where else next that are of and part of that culture, working with women in that culture and in that economy to empower themselves through entrepreneurship. So to me, this is a very progressive model, and it's a model, I think, whose politics and whose values very much align with Rollins College.
And it also very much aligns with your personal leadership vision. But right now, Grant, we are all facing so many challenges locally, whether we live in India or Brazil or the United States or any other country, locally, nationally, globally, with the pandemic, of course, and the impact that is having on every single person. How does Global Links empower women and help them during this challenging time? And how have you had to change your vision to accommodate the challenges that we're facing?
Well, I don't mean to be there are very few good things to say about the pandemic and the damage and the harm that it has brought to the global economy and to the people struggling to make a life in this global economy. But there's something about a crisis of this scale that does bring you back to very core purposes and very core values. And I think that, to me, I hadn't put these two together, but thank you for that question. You know, what Global Links is doing is it's not a program to empower women leaders from the top down. It's a grassroots empowerment program, which means that for all of the women who are participating, they are in very local situations, very local economies with very material and practical problems to solve. And in the middle of a pandemic, that's where you have to start. You have to be engaged with your local community and your own personal economy to make it through the day. And so as a model, in some sense, it's a model designed for a pandemic situation because it is so grassroots. This is not a time, I mean, much to my own disappointment, but this is not a time when national or international governance bodies they're doing what they have to do and not to very good effect. And in the meantime, the people of the world are having to navigate their way through their own personal economies, their own challenges, their own hardships. And I think Global Links is a network of women who have created sort of an empowerment structure to navigate all of those challenges when our larger systems fail us. So that's a very interesting insight of what Global Links is doing in the moment of a pandemic.
And right now, the grassroots effort is more important than ever. I feel. My husband often says, "Men think of me, and women think of we," because we've seen so many women when they're empowered, it changes their lives, but it also changes the lives of their children, their family, and ultimately their community. But men must be involved in the empowerment of women. And why do you think that is important to have men more involved than less involved?
Well, as you're saying, Susan, you know, some of the best ways for men to be involved is to really get out of the way and be quiet. And sometimes that's hard for men because of how they're positioned in the global economy. I mean, the history of the world, the history of the developing world could be told as a history of patriarchy. It could be told as a history and a process of patriarchy, which is to say male domination of the means of production and of power and of power relationships. And, you know, if we just say something very general, you know, it's not like I would give the men of global history very high marks. And, you know, what Global Links is so prescient about is this is certainly the time of global women's empowerment. It's time for men to cultivate their own humility and recognize that the voices of women have a kind of wisdom, have a kind of insight, have a kind of vision of humanity and human relationships that may well do a much better job helping us move forward as a global economy, but also move forward as a global civil society. So the reason I'm so enthusiastic about Global Links being a program for empowering women is because the world needs women who are empowered. And I take, I don't know if any of you were able to tune in on the Democratic Convention in the U.S. last night or read about it this morning, but Michelle Obama gave a very compelling speech. And, now we have a vice presidential candidate, and Kamala Harris, who is a woman of mixed African-American descent and Indian descent. And when I listen to these women leaders, I just want to be quiet and say, yeah, listen to them, do what they're doing. This is what we should be hearing right now. And I think Global Links just recognizes that in the possibilities for women's leadership. And it's creating a whole network of women's leadership that I think will both have an effect on global civil society, but especially, perhaps, and I hope, on the very local cultures in which these programs exist.
I agree with you. Last night watching Michelle Obama, it was the first time I had ever seen a first lady or a former first lady take such a key role, and she was very dynamic, and it's great to see that they embraced that. Grant, there are a lot of studies that show that deep, ongoing relationships across cultures have many benefits. How does Global Links, how is it beneficial to the larger community to have those deep relationships?
Yeah, you'll permit me, you'll forgive me for being just a little bit philosophical here, but my enthusiasm for cross-cultural learning has everything to do with what I understand to be the very basic tenets of creating new knowledge. I think new knowledge is created by bringing different ideas into dialogue with one another and finding and discovering new possibilities that no single point of view can bring to the table. You only develop new insights by listening to those who think differently and then trying to solve problems trying to solve problems together and drawing upon those differences to create new knowledge. I think that that's the way knowledge production works, sort of philosophically. And so what is so brilliant about the structure of Global Links is that it's structured around cross-cultural listening, right? I mean, it's not like the professors of the Crummer Graduate School of Business come in with all of the answers. Absolutely, that's not what it's about. It's about listening to the formulation of the problems at the very local level, and then listening across cultures to come to a mutual understanding, and then going about an endeavor of problem solving that draws upon that dialogue. So I think the future of humanity is to be found in the future of global, multicultural, cross-cultural listening and collaboration. And I'll just digress here for a minute, Susan, and talk about this moment of nationalism across the world, right? We have nationalist movements. The United States is in the midst of a moment of hyper-nationalism that I think is very destructive. But you see nationalist movements in India, you see them in countries around the world, and I think, this is just a theory, but I think that this is the last gasp of a kind of nationalist, patriarchal, male-dominated view of the world, which is oppositional and competitive rather than collaborative and more collaborative.
And more of an exchange of ideas.
And more of an exchange of ideas, exactly. So I think that if you look at the trajectory of global civil society, it is moving in the direction of globalization. It is moving in the direction of globalization. But this is if it's a river, you know how rivers flow in a direction, but there are back eddies that go the other way? I think that this moment of nationalism is a back eddy in a large river of globalization that cannot be turned back. And I think that that's all for the good, and that this time will pass. And the future, and if you're a young person seeking your education, if you're somebody that's trying to imagine a business that's going to have staying power, you have to be thinking globally. And so that's why I remain optimistic, and that's why I'm so enthusiastic about Global Links, is because it is a program based upon a framework and a philosophy of globalization as an empowering set of relationships across cultures.
I am listening as you're speaking just now. You have a really broad and diverse background. Not only do you have a couple of degrees in philosophy, but also in biology. And that has to be, having such a diverse background has to be immensely helpful right now with the travel restrictions and the changes in attitudes, not only here in the United States, but as you mentioned, India and the unrest there, et cetera. How can we keep an international exchange of ideas at the forefront with all of these challenges? Because it really is polarizing what's happening to us in some ways.
It is polarizing, and I think that what we're doing this morning, right here, right now, or this evening, wherever you are, I mean, technology is very much a tool of transnational collaboration and empowerment, and we're using it in just that way. I mean, if you think about the role that social media and digital media has played in connecting the world, not just at the level of global economies and not at the level of states and governments, but at the level of people-to-people communication. Because really, I think that when you put people together in relationship across boundaries, trying to solve problems, the larger structures can tend to fade into the background. And so, yes, right now we have travel restrictions. We have the closing of borders. We have all kinds of retrograde impositions to global cooperation. But at the base, we also have a generation of young people who simply don't understand the world that way and don't have a lot of interest in that world. That's the old men's world. And they're sort of looking over their shoulder and saying, you know, you guys don't get it. And by the way, we don't really much care because we have work to do. And we're going to go about it in spite of these impediments because we know how. So look out. And I think that that's great.
The Global Links model is an example of private-public partnerships and how they can be extremely effective. What are the advantages, but also the challenges of this type of a collaboration? And is there anything that you would change, particularly about Global Links and about that, the format?
Well, you know, the global economy is, and the global civil society is broken up into sectors, right? So you have private corporations, you have not-for-profits, NGOs, you have governmental organizations, you have the academy or higher education, and too often, everybody goes about their business within those silos, and the most powerful and productive things happen when you break down those walls and reach across them, because every sector has something to learn from the others. It's really a corollary of what I was saying about cross-cultural understanding. You know, in some sense, organizational structures like corporations and higher education and NGOs and governmental organizations, those are all structures of organizations that have certain rules, certain understanding of how you get business done, certain ways of understanding humanity and human relationships. And to remain siloed is to miss the creativity that can happen through cross-cutting between those sectors. And what's interesting and fascinating about Global Links is that it is a public-private partnership that really breaks down the walls between government, NGOs, corporate organizations, and higher education. And in that sense, I think it again is a harbinger of the future. At least just speaking for higher education, the problems that the world needs to solve are too complex for us to think that we can stay in the ivory tower and come up with feasible solutions. We need to be cooperating with corporations and with governments to address the most pressing problems.
How do we accomplish that? How do you reach out to some of these corporations? I mean, they must have so many people reaching out to them. How can we as Global Links or as Rollins be more effective at that?
Oh, I just think that the only way it really happens is at the level of relationships and finding those inroads, and I think this is to me, this would be a lesson for everybody that's engaged in a project or an endeavor, that at the end of the day, its effectiveness depends upon the quality of relationships of the people trying to do it, and at the human level of cultivating trust and mutual understanding. And I know that when I talk to my colleagues and my associates who are coming from the corporate sector, I know that a lot of times academics will come to a corporate relationship with certain prejudices about what people who are in a corporate organization are like and believe. And the same is true the other way. Corporate folks have certain views about who professors are and what higher education is about. Those are all stereotypes that are not dissimilar from a kind of prejudice. And the magic of human relationships is it breaks those stereotypes into pieces, because you realize that the person on the other side of the table from you is actually, you have many more points of commonality than you do difference. So again, it happens at the level of human relationships.
Boy, is that true. We definitely have much more in common than we do differences, and that for everybody. So far, Global Links has focused on deep connections, which means the scale has been very small. How could Rollins and the Global Links program expand to have a greater impact?
I think that that's a very interesting question, and I think it would be a soul-searching question, because certain things are lost when you go to scale. I mean, what you do is you broaden your impact, and the structure of Global Links is such that the impact could and should be greater. So we could and should look to bring in more corporate partners and establish more nodes of the matrix. I'm completely behind that, and I would love to help try to accomplish that. But I also just want to recognize that a lot of the real transformative power of Global Links is in the intimacy of its scale. And whether or not that could be scaled without that loss of intimacy and transformative power is, I think, a very live question. I mean, let me make an analogy. Rollins is a small liberal arts college on purpose. And right down the street is the University of Central Florida. UCF has 66,000 students. I mean, there's a place for UCF, and they do very good work for who they are. But they can't do some things that we do as part of our very soul. And so it's not, so as we ask the question of how can we scale Global Links, I think it's a good occasion for introspection about what is of ultimate or basic value about Global Links, so as not to put that to risk in an effort to scale it.
Well, I think now with travel restrictions and that most things are done via a Zoom or WebEx or some sort of video chat, maybe now that's an opportunity to include a few more Global Links leaders. It might be easier now than ever before to do that. So perhaps that's something that we should all look at and see, because it's such a great program. And I know when Rick and Eleanor were in Iraq several years ago, when they kind of came up with the idea for Global Links and then approached Rollins, and then Mary got involved, and then you coming on board, it has just been a tremendous, tremendous benefit to the program. And I'm thinking that we need a grants grant for maybe that's what we should call it, because your supportive nature, and not only you but Peg, your wife, who's deeply involved in all things Rollins and has embraced the culture there, the students, the faculty, the board. I mean, we have just been so honored and thrilled to have you as the leader of Rollins, which I am a graduate of Rollins, and we've had several children who have graduated from Rollins and friends. But I do happen to think, after visiting many, many, many schools, not only in the US, but around the world, I do think it's the most beautiful campus I've ever seen. Plus, it's right next to Winter Park, Florida, which is one of the most charming towns that you'd ever want to be in. So Grant, thank you so much. I know that Mary is going to open this up to questions from the audience, and I'm sure there are going to be some good questions for you. Thank you so much, and it was great seeing you.
Well, you're very gracious and generous in your comments, and I've certainly enjoyed the conversation. And Mary, if you have other questions that we can pursue, I'm happy to do that.
Great, thank you. And thank you so much. We actually have questions for both you, Grant, and for Susan.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna interspace those a little bit. One of the first questions that came in, Grant, because you mentioned Rollins' mission, and you said that Rollins' mission aligned with your values. What experiences brought you to see the importance of global citizenship and responsible leadership?
Well, I'm sorry, but I'm going to give a scholar's answer. My first experience that introduced me to these ideas was books. It was really my course of study. I became fascinated with how different cultures could have such different values, and what the possibility was for multicultural democracies. It was a very philosophical, very academic question of how can it be that people that have such different values come together and form a democratic society and make it work. And so I began studying multicultural democracies. And that led me to study in India, study in Trinidad, study in other places that I saw as multicultural democracies. And I spent my research time there, both researching them and writing about them, in pursuit of this question of how can multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial societies form a democratic society that is fair and equitable. So it was a sort of very academic entry that became more existential or more experiential, because I spent time in these places coming to learn and love the people and the culture. So that's the answer. I was driven by really a passion to understand how the world can move towards multicultural civil society.
You know, I love your answer so much, not just because as I've been listening to you, you remind me of why I love being at Rollins and teaching with Rollins and having the opportunity to interact with people, but it ties to what Susan was saying also, that right now with restrictions, not being able to travel, the importance of books is even more, right? And thankfully, because of technology, some of us who maybe couldn't get hands-on books before can now do that in an online format. So although your answer is a little scholarly to start with, I actually love it. I think it's really timely for today, right?
No, it's a good point.
Yeah, we have another question, and it's a little for both you and for Susan. So what are some of the obstacles that you have found in your career path, and how did you overcome them? So if you think of yourselves as leaders in different industries, but with some similar values and missions, how did you overcome some of those obstacles that you've met with?
Why don't you go first, Susan?
Okay. I think all of us have in life, I was talking about this the other day with our children who are all adults. what is it? Perhaps there's one thing or a couple of things that defined your path in life and maybe make things different. Maybe it's something bad, maybe it's something good. If you have a death of a loved one that puts you on a different trajectory than perhaps you would have been. For me, working at Disney World, when the Magic Kingdom first opened, I was in high school and in college, and I was a tour guide and a VIP hostess. And I met people. I mean, in Orlando, there was nothing to do except once Disney World opened. Prior to that, you went to Gatorland or to the Tupperware headquarters for a field trip, or the Merita Bread Factory. So it was very simple. So it just opened up a world for me that I didn't know exists. I met people from all around the world, whether it was King Hussein or the president of Eastman Kodak or a governor of a state here or whatever. And it really had a great impact on me. Challenges, once I went to work, especially not so much at ABC in Orlando. When I first went there, they wouldn't hire me because I was a girl. They literally said, we've never had a girl before. And I offered to work for free. And ultimately, they hired me, and I got my foot in the door. And then after that, when I went to ABC, and again, I was the first female account executive there, and it was a boys club. And I just kind of put my foot down, and I said, things have to change. We're not going to behave this way anymore because there are now women here. And I think that's what it takes, is speaking up, but do it in a polite, nice way. And they respected it, and things changed. And that's what it is, I think, is speaking your mind and saying that you're not going to accept something that you don't believe is proper.
And as I reflect on the question, Mary, I think the biggest category of obstacles that I have encountered in my career, I would say, are resistance to change. And you know, I am just one with a driving passion for innovative problem solving and creative new visions, and all of that inevitably runs into resistance. And I would say that for all of the women on this call today, you're trying to do something that is new. It's new for you, but it may also be new for the cultural context in which you're working. And I know that you're going to encounter resistance. And, you know, one of the things my dad used to raise me on is he said, you know, persistence overcomes resistance. And I've always just felt that without, I mean, what you want to do when you encounter resistance, because I've encountered so much of it, is first you want to be sufficiently humble to listen to the point and maybe even the truth behind the resistance. Why is this person or these people, why are they resisting this change? Because maybe by listening to them, you discover that there are things that where you need to accommodate your own views or your own ideas because you've missed something. So begin with humility and begin with listening, but then don't ever give up on your values. I mean, change would never, ever happen if visionary people gave up when they encountered resistance. So I think sort of managing resistance and embracing resistance and sort of absorbing resistance as you create change, that's been sort of the form of the obstacles that I've encountered throughout my career. And now, frankly, you know, frankly now it's just so recognizable and predictable to me that it's not even surprising or demoralizing anymore. It's part of the nature of change that you're going to encounter resistance. So that would be sort of my reflection on that question.
If I can say one thing, Mary.
Yes, please.
A man's point of view, and you use the word resistance, which, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking for a woman, it's more like block walls sometimes instead of pushback or resistance. Sometimes the obstacles seem so overwhelming, but your point of doing it in a dignified manner and listening and trying to have that conversation is extremely important.
Mhm. One of the things we talk a lot about, both within Global Links, but also in our courses at Crummer in the areas of design thinking and social entrepreneurship, is the concept of empathy, right? And empowerment, and that those things come together. So when we listen, as you're saying, Grant, to the other, and we bring our level of expertise and experiences in the world, right? That's a really powerful conversation and a really powerful movement that can overcome some changes. And as I'm listening to you, I'm also thinking, and I'm going to connect it to one of the questions from the audience, right? We're in the 100th year of women's suffrage, right? The right for women to vote, or what for us in the United States is the 19th Amendment. And that's an excellent example of women coming together to be persistent, to really challenge some very strong thoughts. And so for me, the suffragists, as they're called here in the United States, are really an inspiration. And this year in particular, I think is a good year for that. But one of our participants asked about that question: who do you both look to for inspiration? Women that you've known either personally or historically, and then how do you pass on this enthusiasm that you have to the next generation to be sure that these ideas continue?
Grant, you go ahead.
Well, just because she's on my mind, I mean, I think Michelle Obama is incredibly inspiring as a woman leader. I actually find Hillary Clinton to be an incredibly powerful woman leader. And in my own sphere, I mean, you won't know these people, but if you look at the senior cabinet of Rollins College, and let's say there are 5 vice presidents, 4 of them are women, and I'm smart enough. I'm only just smart enough to surround myself with people who are smarter than I am. And so, I mean, these women leaders at Rollins, in development, in academic affairs, in admissions, in student affairs, I mean, they are an inspiration to me every day, because they are at the top of their profession, and they are incredibly driven by the mission. And to watch them collaborate between and amongst themselves, I mean, I learn from them every day. So I have sort of, if you will, mentor model women leaders surround me in my own workplace, and I learn from them every day.
Susan, what do you think?
For me, it would be a lot of the women in my family. My grandmother, my mother's mother, who grew up on a farm here in Central Florida without electricity or indoor plumbing. And even when I was in high school, there was no indoor plumbing. And I would watch how hard she would work. And my own mother, who is one of the most elegant, classy people you'd ever want to meet, who grew up, on a farm in the middle of nowhere. My sister, my friends, I get a little bit from all of them, and I learn from them. And I think the most important thing is to be true to yourself. And my mother always really encouraged us to be the best that we could. I'm the first in my family to graduate from college. And it's amazing in one generation how things can change for someone, for a family. And that's what I see when I look at all these global leaders. And then when Rick and I have had the opportunity to travel around the world with his job and see the change that happens. So I've taken something from, I think, especially woman, every woman that I've met, I think I've taken a little bit and learned something from them.
Mm-hmm. And if I think about sort of the next generation, which one of the participants asked, I'm going to combine a kind of answer, but a thought provoking for you, Susan, and you, Grant, is that the first thing that I did when I came to Rollins about 13 years ago was I went on campus and I found myself some mentors. And some of them are still here. One of them is actually on the call, Mickey Meyer, who you also mentioned, Grant, as someone who you have surrounded yourself with in that aspect. But one of the questions was sometimes women don't support each other, and how do we create an environment of that? And I want to answer that by saying you're hanging out with the wrong women, right? If that's in fact what's happening, there are women out there who are looking to support you, and you're kind of hanging around. So go out and be active and find those mentors. And a mentor doesn't have to be older than you. For those of you who know Mickey Meyer, she's considerably younger than me. They don't have to be in your same profession, right? It's just finding, sometimes we say, and find your tribe, right? Find some people who you are doing something that you admire, and surround yourself with them, because they're out there. And the naysayers, or those resistant people that you're mentioning, Grant, they're out there too. And sometimes you get to choose who you want to hang out with. Sometimes you don't, but sometimes you do. I don't know if that resonates with you guys in terms of thinking about the next generation and how they might get invited, enthusiastic themselves, or move into helping others to become enthusiastic, is the word the person used.
A good example and good advice also.
Well, Mary, what I would say is I'm glad you brought up mentoring, because I have had just incredibly influential mentors at every stage of my development and career, and I still do. And what maybe some of the listeners don't think about, but you said, is you don't have to wait for a mentor to adopt you or to be discovered. If you just can find within yourself the gumption, and you don't have to be as forward as to approach somebody and say, "I've adopted you as my mentor. Will you please begin?" But you can adopt mentors. And what's interesting is that, of course, I'm in deep relationship with most of my mentors, but I've also had mentors who didn't know that they were my mentor, and who I was not really in relationship with, but I watched the way they led, and I listened to the way they led, and I learned from the way they led, and they never knew that they were having this huge influence on me. So I would encourage everybody on the call here to look for those people that surround you in your life, just like Susan was saying, the women that surround her in her life, that you can, in a kind of practice of mindful reflection, study them and ask yourself, what are they doing that makes them so effective? Why do I admire them, and how can I come to implicate some of those qualities in myself?
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that you mentioned a mindful reflection as well. And we're not going to have time to get to this question, but one of the questions was, it ties back to what Susan asked you originally, Grant, is that we're in a high stress time right now with the pandemic, with some of the economic issues, the leadership that is so important, but that mindful reflection, and that looking to local leaders and local networks as well as above. I just wanted to reemphasize that, with your permission, because I want to acknowledge the participant who asked, and it said, we're really stressed out right now as students. Many of us are students. We're really stressed out. So I don't know, other than that mindful reflection, in the 30 seconds we have left, if either you or Susan want to say anything. And in your speaking, I'll remind everyone to put on their cameras so that we can get ready for that picture.
Defer to Grant.
Yes, well, to either of you, actually. Go ahead, Grant.
I would just say that this is a moment of high stress and anxiety, and the younger you are, the larger this time and space seems, because your life has been shorter. I'm not an ancient person, but I've been around a while, and I know that this is going to be a moment. This is going to be a chapter. It's very tumultuous. It's very disruptive. It produces a lot of anxiety, and we, both in the local and the global sense of we, will get through this, and we have to keep our eyes focused on that future, because there's another side to this pandemic where we have a whole lot of other problems to take on, and future pandemics, and we just have to keep building our global capacity for managing this. So, I guess I would urge I would urge everybody just to have a slightly longer view, that this is a marathon called humanity, and we're part of a process. And this moment of tumult will be just that. And we are learning from it. I am learning from it. I hope you are too, and we'll be stronger for it. And so let me just say, Susan, it's been wonderful to be in conversation with you. Mary, thank you for setting this up. Yasmin, thank you for making it all work. I've learned a lot being in conversation with you, and thank you for everything you do for Global Links.
Thank you, Grant, very much. And it's very important. I love your enthusiasm. Very important to maintain a positive attitude, and this will get better. You're right.
Great. So as we're getting ready, Juliana, to take our photos, so if you haven't yet, put your camera on, and I'm going to summarize those 2 words that Grant gave us. With persistence is perspective, right? Developing the perspective over a lifetime. So thank you both so much. Juliana, we're ready whenever you're ready. And you're ready. So you got the first screen and the second screen. Are we okay? Okay, smile. Oh, okay. Everybody get ready to smile. 1, 2, 3, smiling.
There you go. I couldn't unmute myself. That's why
There you go.
So now second screen, everybody smile.
All right, great. Thank you so much. And to remind everyone, right, our next call is on September 15th. And we are going to have the pleasure of interacting with our entrepreneurs. So one of the entrepreneurs I know is here on the call, Sangeeta Sen. Give us a wave, Sangeeta. Sangeeta Sen is going to talk to us from Sunny Ray Solutions. And also we have from Brazil, Sangeeta is from Calcutta, and we are going to have from Brazil, Ariane Garcia Abdul Mash, sorry, Ariana, I know that's not, but her brand is brand Ane Abdul. And then we're working also from the Raleigh Social Enterprise, a local entrepreneur, Suzanne from an organization that works here in the US and in Turkey, Suzanne from Sanad. So come back to us on September 15th. And to answer one of the questions that came in on Facebook from one of our alums and great student, Patty Johnson, yes, we want to take this local. Yes, we want to have another cell here in the United States, Patty. So keep helping us to make that happen. Thank you, everyone, so much. It was so great to see you. We'll see you on September 15th.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.